Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on the channel. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. My guest today is another first timer here on the channel. As an author, writing has been a lifelong passion of my guest. From a young age, books have always provided her comfort and solace. And now she finds that same comfort and solace when she sits down and puts pen to her words. It's a hobby that has soon become a serious pursuit when she realized the infinite power of the written word. Through her stories, she tries to capture the essence of what it means to be human, to offer a lens through which her readers can explore life in a new and enriching way. And if you follow her on social media, you know that she is the author of the Order series. And to tell us more about that, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, author Katerina St. Clair. Katerina, thank you so much for coming here on the channel today.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
No problem, Katerina. So before we dive into the Order series and what it's about, is there anything more you would like to add about your background as a writer or anything else about your person?
So I started writing on fan fiction websites. That was kind of where I started. Didn't really know how the publishing world worked. I had no clue how any of it worked actually. So I kind of just gravitated towards there. I kind of put stuff out and saw if people liked it, and a few of my books did well. So a couple of people were like, "Why don't you just try self-publishing?" And I was like, "I've always wanted to write. Like that's what I've always wanted to do, but I didn't know how to approach it." So the first step was starting on those social media platforms and then just kind of educating myself on how self-publishing worked. But for me growing up, I was always told that publishing is unrealistic, being an author is unrealistic because of give and take how much people actually sell in this industry. And
Right.
so it was super scary to even try because there's so many self-published authors, so many people trying, and it's an intimidating field because there's
Hmm.
just so much. And I tremendously appreciate traditional publishing houses, but they're not really catered to indie authors in many ways, because you need so many other steps to get there, like literary agents and querying and all that crazy stuff. And
Right.
it's like it's just stacks up. So it's just intimidating. But the encouragement on those social media platforms is what got me going even to begin with. So that's why when new authors are coming around and asking for advice, I always say to start there because it's like a soft launch to
Hmm.
your writing, and it's not as critical as like Goodreads and reviewers and ARC readers and that kind of stuff because that can be a lot on someone who doesn't really know what they're doing. So
Right. Definitely. So, for people who are watching this for the first time, what can you tell us about your book, The Order, and that series?
so my love for reading developed because of the dystopian books back in like 2012. There was a
Hmm.
huge surge, and they were all young adult. And I remember being in Battle of the Books, and our whole genre that we were supposed to read was dystopian.
Mm.
So I had read all my life, but I wasn't like an avid reader. And then that kind of just sparked a whole love for it. And then as I grew up, I realized that it tapered off the whole dystopian era. A lot of people think that we're in one right now, so what's the point? Um, and I wanted to cater to that huge chunk of people that still love those
Mm.
dystopian books that had grew up. They weren't young adult anymore. So I wrote a new adult series that had the elements that those books couldn't because they were young adult. So it was kind of that love of dystopian books evolved into a whole series of books catered to all those people that grew up, me included, because I couldn't find anything. So I was like,
Right.
well, I already want to write. Why not do it? So that was kind of where that started. So
Oh, okay. So that would you say is almost like your aha moment, that that's where you want to bring about your story because you noticed that there was a lot of people that were still interested in that genre, correct?
yeah, and it just wasn't really on the market. So um, and I just wanted to see it. So I was like, I guess I'll write it, see what happens. So
Nice. To be actually perfectly honest, I've only ever read like maybe like a few dystopian books or books that are in a dystopian setting, and I've always really intrigued how authors take that aspect and make it their own. So for you, Katerina, when you began penning this book, what was sort of your goal that you set out with, as well as the need you want to satisfy for fans that loved this genre?
I my only goal since day one has never been sales. It's never been anything like that. It's always just been giving readers a world to kind of immerse themselves into. And the best way I could find a way to do that was to plot a 10-book series with 4 prequels and 6 in the main series, and start off with my prequels and um and give them just this huge world that they could kind of dive into, that I myself got to kind of step aside from my day job and just not be here, because the world is kind of nuts, and it just I needed that escape. So for my readers since day one, I have solely just wanted them to have a place that isn't here on
Mhm.
Earth, and give them kind of an escape. Um, so that's it.
Nice. Now could you give us like a little teaser of what people can expect from the book? Is it like in like the future, another world? Is it like on Earth, like an alternate reality? Can you give us like a
So
little window peek?
yeah, so the first 4 books I started with my prequels. The 4th book is coming out in October. Um, and so the first 4 books kind of follow a society split up into 2 class systems. There's untouchables and unfortunates. The untouchables are the elites, and the unfortunates are the lower class. And there's a clear divide between them. And their whole society had to be rebuilt because of nuclear fallout, because of the wars that happened years prior. And they did a lot of genetic testing. They started implementing mandatory chips, which I thought was really interesting when Elon Musk came out with all that stuff. And I was like, ugh. Um, and it it was overall a way to make society void of health implications and anything that could make people not like elite human beings. But part of that chip, they get told that the chip is put into their head for health reasons. But long story short, it's not for health reasons. It's a way to keep people controlled, because people don't want to be divided and like that without suggestions. So the chips are implanted in their frontal, like back here, and it extends to their frontal lobe. And it's mandatory testing called expulsion testing at the age of 4,
Mm.
where they have to get it inside their head. But what it also does is funnel out a group of people that had genetic alterations because of the fallout that the chip doesn't work on. So that's how they take people out, because they're called the marked, and they kind of flush them out of society. But a few people, including our main character, kind of got past that. So that's kind of like a glimpse into the first 4 prequels. But the whole 4 prequels are setting up the villain for the main series. I wanted to start with my prequels so that the villain for the main series, all their evil makes sense, because you'd spend 4 books essentially following their story on how it happened. So
Oh, interesting. Very nice. So
yeah.
pretty much it almost sounds like that, almost like, would it be wrong for me to say it sounds like the villain is sort of like the main character of your series? That it's gonna be the forefront of him?
So the first 4 prequels, you're basically, all my readers are trying right now to guess who the villain is going to be. So there's a whole
Oh.
lineup on who it could be. Um, it might be the main character, it might be a side character. They're trying to figure that out.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
and then for the main series, the main characters are actually 2 side characters that you only see a few times in the prequels, that offer huge parts to the plot, but you don't really see them because they're kind of in the background. So, which is funny, because I never even initially plotted the prequels. I did the whole main series, and then I just was like, on a whim, one November, was like, I feel like my villain needs to have some more sustenance, because they're going to do a lot of bad things, and they need that. It needs to make sense why they did all of it. So,
Wow. So when you began writing this series, what was almost like the initial feedback like from like friends and family? Was it positive, negative, mixed? And is there one review that really stands out to you?
um, it was positive from family and friends, and readers. I don't personally do arcs, because I kind of get in my head about it. If I have people reading my stuff before it's out, I almost like nitpick my work to cater to what people say. And I
Mm,
know that's not traditional for some people, but I like writing for myself. And if people
right.
don't like it, that's fine. But when I let too many people read it, I get in my head. Like when I'm writing, I don't even read any other books, because I don't want to bleed their writing into mine. Um,
Ah, okay.
so, but I mean, all of the feedback was really positive. Of course, there's people who tell me I shouldn't do it. It's stupid, which you get that a lot in indie publishing. And of course, there's reviewers that are critical, and you sometimes cling on to those reviews, and I think that's just part of the process. Um, and I kind of just had to come to the realization that it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but as long as I'm happy with what I'm putting out, not everyone's gonna love it, and that's okay. It's not for the people that don't love it. It's for the people who actually want an escape. So if it's not their escape, that's fine. But it was kind of, I try not to get in my head about what other people think because
Mm.
again, I'm trying to write it for myself.
Right, of course, of course. And it actually brings up something that we'll talk about later in the interview. So, as a follow-up question, so from the reviews you got from friends and family, as well as readers, do you
Mhm.
feel that their reviews and responses validated your goals that you set out with this book, in the sense, as you said, you wanted to be an escape from reality?
Yeah, I've had hundreds of people reach out and tell me how immersed they were in the story, and every single time I respond as much as I to everything. I try to respond to everything because it means so much when someone says that my book had an impact on them. Um, I think that my goal I set out to fulfill is happening, and I think that at the end of the day, I have touched some people's minds and hearts with this story, and that's kind of what my goal was. So, um, I'm tremendously grateful every time a reader reaches out. I kind of do a little happy dance because like it's kind of nuts to write something and then have someone else read it like that you don't even know and it has an impact on them. It There's not a feeling that really matches that.
Right. I completely agree. I 100% agree. And it actually kind of leads very nicely into the first reflective question, which is, I'm sure you definitely agree, Katerina, that writing a book, especially a lengthy series, is not an easy feat. I mean, it's hours and hours of planning, hours and hours of editing, revising, and even after that, it's finding cover artists, finding the editors, finding a program that's going to format the book correctly to where you want it, and then once you have it all neatly wrapped in a bow, you present it to the digital or world stage, whatever platform it is. And then the voice in the back of every author's mind, that voice of imposter syndrome hitting us, saying that, why did you write this? No one's going to read it. You pretty much just copy
Yeah.
someone else's work. So for you, Katerina, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue writing this series because you are passionate about this series?
So my start on this series was not so traditional. Like I said, I didn't know anything, which means I also didn't know about editing scams. Um, so I had my three manuscripts. I write a book in about a month, and I had three of them ready for editors. And I thought I cut a great deal, $500 for three books that were 150,000 plus words. I was very wrong. They held on to all three of my manuscripts and said that they would release them to the public before I could if I didn't send them more money. And so the reason I'm talking about this is because editing scams are a really real deal that we need to
Mm-hmm.
talk about more. Um, and so I essentially had 2 days to edit three books and put them out there. So I would say my imposter syndrome kind of kicked in a little bit there when I was like, this isn't going to be fully edited to the extent that I want it to be, but I have no choice right now. So I
Right.
think that really shook me. And thankfully, I finally found an editor, and she's revising the first three books, and it's a whole deal. But I would say that was kind of where I hit my imposter syndrome. But
Mm.
moving on from that, I write so quickly and so frequently that I don't really give myself much time to get in my head about it. Um, I I think my best advice for people that are kind of in their head and self-doubting about publishing is that at the end of the day, you're the only one you need to satisfy. Like, I know that reviews are essential and like part of the process, but like you're going out of your way to format, teach yourself how to do everything, covers, putting more money into it than you're gonna get for a while. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're making all that sacrifice, so do it for you. There's no one else that you're like 10 years from now, maybe your book is still at one sale, but I mean, you're doing it for you and that's all you can do. Because if you start I've noticed personally, this is my belief, if you start doing things for other people or you're solely for your readers or whatever, you start to take away from the parts of your book that make it yours. And I think it's easy as indie authors to get in our head about like what other people want and not what we want as authors for our own series. Because I mean, it to me this whole literary world is so cutthroat, and it's like you are either doing things wrong or you're doing things right, and it just feels like there's just so many rules. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's intimidating and it's easy to get in your head because I never know if I'm doing anything right, you know? I never know if I'm taking the right approach, if I'm getting involved in another scam. It's scary, but it shouldn't be a deterrent for people to not do it. And my dad always told me if one person reads your book, you're still an author because you published it and you did that. And I think that's something to hold on to because any good thing is going to take time. So
Yes. And you actually touched on something that is very important. Like, again, we just talked about editing scams as well as vanity publishing, which are huge in the book world, which I've mentioned this a few times, viewers and listeners. Vanity publishing is probably one of the most, among many things that are very harmful and detrimental to first time authors and young authors as well, because they promise you all these things, they suck you in, and you have to fight to get your book back. I had a friend of mine who many of you know I've named up numerous times, who was scammed by vanity publishing, and she had to fight to get her book back and then resell it as a second edition just to make sure that she got the full creative control. It's a huge thing, which actually leads perfectly now into the business side of the interview of being an author, which will also touch on the two very important things in this interview, which is the paths, which is do you want to be an author or be known as an author? Because those have two very different goals with two very different objectives with different outcomes and hurdles. So, Katerina, you said that you want to go the self-publishing route initially, and that seemed to work well for you as opposed to going the traditional publishing route, where as you said, making query letters, submitting to publishing houses, waiting, and all that stuff. And then now looking back, do you now have a better idea of the industry as opposed to when you just started out with your books in the initial beginning?
oh, 100%. I I mean, there's definitely some things I would go back and change now that I know how it all works, but I can't. Would I per se not self-publish again? I would most definitely self-publish again. Um, because sorry, I've noticed with traditional publishing, if they want something, they'll ask for it, even if it's already out. Um, there's been quite a few self-published authors that have been traditionally published, and their work has already been out. Um, I know a lot of people try and traditionally publish, and they put themselves in ruts, and because they're constantly trying to get some traction in that field. But I think the best part for me about self-publishing was how much creative control I had over it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was no one telling me what to put on covers or what to put in content. There wasn't a whole table of editors re-editing what I wrote to be something different. And it looking back at it, I would most definitely self-publish again. And um, I think I'm happy with the direction it all went. Definitely wouldn't want to get scammed again.
No.
But other than that scam, I mean, everything has been pretty great. there's still run of the mill like people who disagree on certain like ways to promote or whatever it might be. Um, but I mean, overall, I'm pretty happy with the self-publishing route. And if I really wanted to go the traditional publishing route, I could try. Um, but as of right now, I think I'm just happy of this series being for me and
Mm,
not, a huge, big traditional publishing house.
right. That's actually very, very fair. And the next question, which actually goes back to what you said in the beginning, how you wrote this book for you, that you wrote this book because this is the book that you wanted to read, and it actually ties perfectly into the audience, because I said this numerous times on other interviews, is that for us authors, when we write our books, we write for ourselves in the beginning because we know our stories better than anyone else. But when we publish them, self-publishing them on either Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or any other small platform, we then need to consider, okay, who's the audience are we trying to cater? Is it the high fantasy, the science fiction, fans of Star Wars, whatever, depending on the book that you write. Now, for you, Katerina, in your own opinion, how important is it for authors to really understand their audience? And do you have a good idea of your audience for your series?
I think it's incredibly important to know your audience. I mean, that's how you get people in, is you got to find your readers. And I've told people that multiple times, is you got to find your readers. I personally think I've found my readers very well, because of how I said earlier, there is a ton of people who wanted adult versions of those dystopian books,
Mm.
like a ton, and just wasn't around. So they kind of emerged from the ashes when I started promoting. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's back. So that was super exciting, and I feel like I kind of had an edge with that, being how there was just kind of silence, like radio silence from the dystopian books, and then I just was like, here I am. So I think that's kind of how I found my readers. I know it's tricky for people who are in like fantasy books and stuff because those are such a hot thing right now.
Right.
Uh, and I haven't dealt with that. I plan on writing a fantasy series, but not right now because they're so popular. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of learning that market of like what's gonna bite right now, but also what do I want to write, and like how can I market this so it stands apart from other people's? Because sadly, your stuff has to stand apart from other people's,
Yes.
and that's the only way you can get people to actually look at it. Because social media has so much stuff on it that you have to grab people's attentions. That's why marketing is so crucial, and it's kind of scary
Yes.
because you put, like I said, you put more into it than you get, and that can be pretty demotivating to some people. I mean, there's definitely been times where I'm looking at my screen and I'm like, why am I doing this? Because like I'm putting so much energy into this, and you know, I mean, you have to be prepared for those moments where you're like, how does my book stand apart, and isolate it and use it? You have to find out what makes your book different than other people's.
Definitely. And you brought up another important thing, which is marketing, which I think is a lot of probably one of the biggest things that indie authors, even myself, struggle with, because it has to be consistent. You have to keep marketing it. You have to doing reels, posts on every platform, X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, every platform that people are on, and it's crazy. And sometimes you may have to even get those other handles, even though if you're not a big social media person, you have to get them if you want your book to get noticed. I've had a lot of people even tell me saying I should get a TikTok for book talk because there's a lot of authors on book talk. I'm not a big social media person. I've only have like two handles, which is LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are my two things, but marketing is a huge thing. And also, going back to what you said in the beginning, how you typically don't read other stories when you're working on your own because you do not want to take someone else's idea or plot point and adapt into your own story, which actually leads to a very interesting discussion, which is, as I'm sure you definitely agree, for all of us authors, we're always inspired by the stories that we've read growing up. They've helped us subconsciously create our own authorial voice and what people expect when they pick up either a book by Gabriel Garcia or a book by Katerina St. Clair, they have an idea of what to expect. So for you, Katerina, who would you say are the authors and or books that really helped you come into your own as an author in terms of, how you approach characters, how you approach world building, the structure of the narrative, and other elements in the story?
Oh, I'd say that's for sure a mix. I mean, Veronica Roth, Suzanne Collins, all of those first person writers were definitely, because I write in first person.
Ooh,
Um,
all right.
so that was kind of where that I think originated. And then as I grew up, I got really into Sarah J. Maas's whole world and Akatar and Throne of Glass, and that's where I kind of wanted to like kind of span out on a series. But like I said, I'd say over since I started writing 6 months ago, I think I've picked up 2 books, maybe 3, because I'm so focused on keeping my world my own. Because I absolutely do not want people to think that I stole ideas, because that's such a
Mm,
thing now, is like people getting compared to like the bigger authors and all that good stuff. So, um, yeah, I'd say a lot of my inspiration derived from authors that I read when I was younger rather than now. Um,
okay.
so I really like Brandon Sanderson and stuff like that. But I've been so focused on this world that I cannot indulge in another world right now, because as a good way to put it is I want my world to be something that people look up to one day.
Mm,
So it needs to be completely isolated from everything else. So I can't give you a good basis of what it is like now, like a current read, because
right.
I'm definitely inspired by the books I read when I was younger. But I
Okay.
wouldn't say anything recently. I tried to make this entirely my own. So if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And you actually brought up something that I used to talk about a long time ago on the show, which were the was a model that I used to live by for a long time before I changed it, which are writers are liars, cheaters, and thieves. We make stuff up, we cheat people out of time, and we always steal from each other because the same story has been told numerous times over, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And now I follow what I like to call the 3 E's, which are educate, entertain, and enlighten. Obviously, you want your story to entertain. You want it to grab the reader's attention and have them enjoy it from beginning to end. Educate, which I think is probably next to enlighten, probably two of the more challenging ones, where you don't want your book to be preachy, but talking about a certain topic that is prevalent in the real world, but it brings up discussion. And sometimes it's a hit or miss, depending on the story, but I definitely think it is possible. And that actually ties into now the next question, which is readership. And I bring this up because, in my opinion, I think readers are different from the audience. Yes, you can target the broad audience, in case of yours, fans of the dystopian genre, but even in that audience, you have different readers. You have people that have grown up with the dystopian genre for the young adults and are now transitioning to more of the adult side of the dystopian genre. But then you also have readers who are just entering in this blind, who didn't grow up with the dystopian genre in the young adults. So for you, Katerina, did you sort of get a good idea of your readership, and has it changed from beginning to now?
Can we not do that? I honestly think my readership has kind of stayed the same. Um, it's it hits the people that are just getting into dystopian and the people that have already been into it. So, um, yeah, I don't think my readership has really changed. I've been very lucky with my readership and how everything's kind of panned out with all of that. Hey, can we not do that?
It's all right. My dog does the exact same thing. You're good.
But yeah, I've been very lucky with my readers kind of being consistent. So I can't say that'll be the case for every author, but
Mm,
it's at a point now where there's people who are willing to read just because I wrote it, and that's kind
right.
of the point I wanted to get to. So I kind of found my readers, and now they're kind of sticking on because they have faith in my writing, which I'm incredibly grateful for. So
Nice.
that was my case.
Awesome. And now we actually lead into probably the more, I don't want to say challenging, but definitely one that is probably the biggest discussion, which is something that you brought up early in the beginning, where you don't typically allow a lot of art creators to like read your story because, as you said, that brings up the sense of anxiety and like trying to cater to what people want or expect, and changing the overall layout of how your story was in the beginning to what people want or expect when reading. And as you said, you write your story for yourself, and if it's not someone's cup of tea, that's completely fine. It will be someone else's cup of tea. But I definitely feel for young authors, especially first-time authors, which may also have some comment on this. We all want to attract everybody, so that means either writing for the newest trend or trope in the publishing world, trying to hit all the niches, trying to get every market. And that's when sort of the passion for writing sort of dies, where you're not writing for fun anymore. You're writing to write and get the gravy train, as well as it's no longer who you are as an author. And especially if it's your first work that you're trying to really pump out there. One author who I had a long time ago on the show, well, not a long time, more like a year ago, gave me this important piece of advice, which is the biggest lie a first time author can believe is that their debut novel is going to be the start of their legacy. Now, on the off chance, that does happen. On the other side, you have authors who rise, fall, rise again, but fall even hard, and that passion for writing dies because it's no longer fun. You made it more of a business and it didn't bear fruit. And now the imposter syndrome is back with a vengeance because your goals didn't get meet. And this comes back to what I like to call the two paths, which is to be an author or be known as an author. And for those who are watching for the first time, to be an author, in my opinion, is where you're writing to create stories and you're putting it out there for new readers to read. And money is not the sole factor in publishing. It's nice to gain capital, but it's not the sole drive. The other one, to be known as an author, where you are marketing your book, you're trying to get on every platform, whether it's uh, book promotions, interviews, podcasts, whatever, and you're trying to write stories catering to a specific market or audience, and really trying to hone in. And sometimes, as I said, that's a hit or miss. So, Katerina, in your opinion, how important is it for first time authors to really understand that there is no guarantee that their debut novel is going to be the start of their legacy as an author, but it should not deter them from writing and telling stories?
Well, I think you have to think of like the big leagues and the statistics behind them. Brandon Sanderson wrote like 20 novels before he got any traction, and even then it was because of a Kickstarter campaign. Suzanne Collins was rejected 60 times with the Hunger Games. Um, J.K. Rowling was rejected by like 20 publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of authors, a lot of big names now, how to write and write and write and write, and finally got some traction. But I'm sure they were writing for themselves. You can't release a debut and expect it to be the next big thing, because it's I hate to say it, but it's not going to be.
Right.
It normally is not going to be. Um, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. You have to keep writing. You have to keep pushing out your material. You have to write 100 books or a whole series or two series and just not shut up about it. Like you have to pretend like you're the only person who's ever going to see it and you need to tell everyone about it, or like you have to know that it's just going to be you for a while. You're the only one who's going to be doing all the work for it, and it's not going to be your debut. It's not going to be your 10th book. It's just what bites, and you don't know what it's going to be. But as long as you're enjoying writing and you don't lose that love for it, and fall in the trope hole, which is, writing what's popular. And I also personally think that's why a lot of the books that are coming out nowadays all seem the same, because they're just rewriting the same tropes and the same stories, and because it's popular with traditional publishing. And I think that's how we get in this hole of just creating the same stories. And that's why indie authors are so important, because they don't have that problem. But they get demotivated because they release a debut novel, put all this money, all this marketing into it, and it sells maybe, I don't know, 200 copies. And that is demotivating, but it can't be the reason you stop. I mean, you don't do that and in a year you're a New York Times bestselling author. Like, it takes years. It's cutthroat.
Right.
You have to put that work in. It's gonna suck. You're not gonna make money. You're not gonna be famous. You're not gonna do a book signing and 100 million people are gonna show up. It's going to suck for a while, but you have to put in that work, because anything that's worth doing, any dream that's worth doing, sucks. If you ask anyone who has accomplished their dreams, they put in a lot of work before they got to it. And it might suck sometimes, but if you ask literally anyone who got the chain, they had to do a lot of work. So
yes.
So I just say that drive to keep working and producing and loving your passion is the only thing you can do. So.
Definitely. And also it helps, especially in the indie community, a good group of people and other authors, supporting one another, because I know, as you said, that in the publishing world, it's kind of almost like a cutthroat business, but I definitely feel within that business, there are authors that, we can work with and who help, that's what I'm thinking of, who help us learn more about the industry and what we can do better, and everything like that. And I would say definitely on Instagram, I've met a lot of great and talented indie authors, which I'm sure you probably have some thoughts on too, Katerina. Probably a lot of fellow authors you probably met on Instagram and social media. So let's actually talk about that. So, Katerina, who would you say has been in your corner from the beginning? Friends, family, fellow authors?
It's definitely my dad and my husband. They supported the dream. I teach during. That's why I have so much time during the summers. But I decided to go back to subbing to take a break, to kind of dive into this writing journey more. And my dad and my husband fully supported it. I don't live with my dad, but kind of your parents' approval and stuff. And but they know that this has been my passion. My best friend's been great. In terms of other authors, I have met so many wonderful people on all of the social media platforms. And I'd say I have a pretty tight-knit group of indie authors that have been wonderful. I try and help them and support them as much as I can, because they're all lovely human beings, and they've been great, and they know all the struggles and the self-doubt and the bad review that made me want to cry in the corner, even though it shouldn't matter. So I kind of think that you find your people as it progresses, and then you'll also find people who maybe aren't awesome sometimes, and that's okay. Maybe they don't like how you're promoting, or they don't like something, but there's been a lot of more great, amazing people than there has been negative. But I mean, I will say, from my experience, the more traction you gain, the more people willing to be negative towards you, which is unfortunate that's kind of how it is. But you have to be prepared that if you do catch the eyes of certain people, you also will catch the eyes of people that are willing to be hateful. So.
Yes, that is actually, very, very true. And on the opposite end of that coin, the more we grow as authors, the more our readership grows, the more of our followers grow, and we get new people who really help us figure out more again about the industry, what small things go, like, hey, you want to go to this event? I'm going to be tabling here. We can table together. Just starting off in like these other small events and meeting new readers and telling people, hey, this is my book, or here's my page you want to follow me. There are so many avenues to really explore and to grow as an indie author. I also think another thing that we haven't talked about is one of the benefits of being an indie author, especially self-publishing, is that you can always edit or re-edit your book if you want to do like a second edition or a special edition. I don't think you can do that as easily as traditional publishing because you would have to talk with your agent and editor and the house. With self-publishing, if you look back at your book, which I've done for two of mine, re-edited them with the help of my editor and republished them as second editions, that's like very, very easy to do. Probably one of the main benefits of self-publishing. But I also want to say this before I go into the final question, which is what we've all talked about, going through the hurdles and everything, the trials and tribulations, the fires and the flames, a little Dragon Force reference for everybody, is that grit trumps talent. No matter how good you are at storytelling, no matter how masterful you are with the pen or the quill or the keyboard, whatever, grit will always trump talent. Because if you're not willing to go through the hurdles as any other author's gone through when it comes to self-publishing or even traditional publishing, you may want to reevaluate your goals that you set out with. And if you do, let me tell you this, and Katerina, you may definitely agree, grit transforms into talent because over time we get better and better with our writing. And as you said, it may be our 20th or 30th book that people will know us the most for. That will be our best seller. And then we can tell people, say, hey, if you like book 30, you should check out 1 through 29 to see my journey as an author. And boom, you got new readers of every age group, of every background, for every genre.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my goal, is to write pretty much everything, and then one day something hits and I'm like, by the way, did all this like 5 years ago. You should go check it out,
Definitely. And now, with everything that we've talked about, Katerina, we now arrive at the final question of this amazing interview. So, Katerina, with everything you learned at the beginning and still learning now about the industry and coming to your own as an author, from all the advice you've gotten from friends, family, your readers, and fellow authors who you've interacted with, what is your word of wisdom to first-time authors who are watching this and really want to get a head start in their own journey down the road?
The one thing I would have suggested to myself is to have started marketing it well before it was out, to get people excited for it, instead of marketing it when I already had it in my hands. I would have built up all my social media platforms to be catered towards books, and specifically my book series. And I would have reached out to more Facebook groups, and I would have just marketed more, and to get people like more excited for it. I would have given myself more time to do that. But like I said, the best piece of advice I got was from my dad, which said if one person buys it, you're an author. You put it out there and one person bought it. So I always hold on to that. Anytime I put out a new book, when the first person buys it, I'm like, that's it. I'm still an author. One person bought it, you know? So, and I remember the first time I put out my first book in January and I got my first sale and I was like, this is nuts. Like, it's finally happening. So that's kind of how I view it. I can't say I'm full of words of wisdom because I'm still learning.
Right.
I'm still trying to navigate all this. I don't know what I'm doing ever fully. I'm just kind of, I'll learn something new every day, literally every day. I try and find something new every day to make my book more known and expand my audience. And so it's just an everyday uphill battle right now, in a good way. It doesn't suck, but it is an uphill battle. So
Right. Definitely. And that is a perfect ending to this awesome author's interview. Thank you all so very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. A huge thank you to author Katerina St. Clair for coming on the show and telling us about her books and what we can expect from the series. Now, Katerina, where can people find and engage with you on social media, and where can people go and buy your books online?
So my Instagram is at your local writer Z, and then my TikTok is Katerina St. Clair author. But if you just search my name, um, it brings up my website and stuff. So, but all my books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I don't use Ingram Spark for other reasons. So, um, but yeah, and my link tree is in both of those social media platforms. So that's kind of where you can find everything.
I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Make sure to go and check out Katerina's books, because you know me. I'll most definitely get a copy of the book and definitely promote it here on the channel. And when I do, I will tag it in a video for you to follow up right here. If I can remember to click the right end video thing. But until then, thank you all so very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel, my fellow scribes and historians and authors alike. And again, a huge thank you to Katerina St. Clair for coming on the show and telling us about her journey as an author. We wish her the very best of success going forward. And who knows, we'll most definitely have her back on the show again for a follow-up interview, perhaps a different book that she is writing. Who knows? You just have to follow her on her Instagram and just be up to date with all of her posts. Until then, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill, asking you all to like, subscribe, and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.